March 11, 2009. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court made history as it tossed out hundreds of juvenile convictions. At the center stood Judge Mark Ciavarella Jr., once a symbol of justice, now its greatest betrayal. His secret dealings would soon unravel, changing countless lives for the worse. Here are 5 judges and how they are treated in prison.
Michael Conahan was one of 2 former judges convicted in the Kids for Cash scandal that took place from 2003 to 2008 and impacted 2,500 kids.
June 2020, inside Coleman Federal Prison, Florida. A former Luzerne County president judge sits alone in his cell, knowing the world beyond those bars still remembers his name. The man who once wore black robes now faces the reality of home confinement. Michael Conahan, one of the 2 masterminds behind the Kids for Cash scandal, never expected to end up here. Conahan's fall from grace was swift and severe. Born in Hazleton, Pennsylvania, the son of a respected local family, he climbed the legal ranks with ambition. By 1994, he'd become a common pleas judge, and just a few years later, president judge of Luzerne County. Those black robes carried power and temptation. The plan started simply. Conahan saw an opportunity when private prison companies came knocking. He used his budgetary authority to close the county-run juvenile detention center, clearing the way for new for-profit facilities. But this deal wasn't about better care for young offenders. It was about money, lots of it, in exchange for sending a steady stream of juveniles to these private jails. Conahan and his partner in crime, Judge Mark Ciavarella, pocketed $2.8 million in kickbacks. The scheme relied on one key element: volume. The more kids they sent away, the more money they made. So minor offenses, truancy, shoplifting, even jaywalking, became prison-worthy crimes in Luzerne County. Conahan oversaw the administrative side, ensuring the contracts and payments flowed smoothly. Ciavarella, presiding over juvenile court, guaranteed a steady supply of children to fill those beds. Complaints began piling up. 4 official grievances landed on the Pennsylvania Judicial Conduct Board's desk between 2004 and 2008, all ignored. The FBI got involved in 2006, tipped off about corruption and nepotism in Luzerne County courts. Meanwhile, hundreds of juveniles faced swift, harsh sentences without proper legal representation. The Juvenile Law Center, based in Philadelphia, received desperate pleas from affected families. Their investigation uncovered hundreds of cases where teens were railroaded through the system. In April 2008, they petitioned the Pennsylvania Supreme Court for relief. The court initially refused, but when federal charges against Conahan and Ciavarella surfaced, they reconsidered, ultimately expunging the records of 2,401 juveniles. By January 2009, the FBI and IRS closed in. Conahan pleaded guilty quickly, hoping for leniency, but he later withdrew his plea, preparing for trial. Facing overwhelming evidence, he pleaded guilty again, accepting a 17.5-year sentence and $900,000 in fines. He was disbarred, stripped of all legal privileges. Prison life for Judge Conahan wasn't easy. Inmates who once faced his gavel now shared his cell block. Guards who once called him Your Honor now call him by a number. He became inmate 15009-067, just another face in the system he once ruled over. The COVID-19 pandemic offered Conahan a lifeline. In June 2020, he was released to home confinement under the CARES Act, citing health concerns. But his freedom came with restrictions, ankle monitors, constant supervision, and the knowledge that his legacy was forever tarnished. His remaining sentence was commuted in December 2024 by President Joe Biden, part of a blanket clemency for nonviolent offenders on home confinement. The decision sparked outrage among victims and Pennsylvania officials. Governor Josh Shapiro called it absolutely wrong, echoing the anger of those still living with the consequences of Conahan's greed. The financial consequences lingered. In August 2022, a federal judge ordered Conahan and Ciavarella to pay $200 million to their victims, $106 million in compensatory damages, and $100 million in punitive damages. Nearly 300 people testified about the lasting trauma caused by their actions. While few expect to see much of that money, The judgment stands as a permanent record of their crimes. Conahan's story serves as a stark warning about power's corrupting influence. He traded justice for profit, ruining young lives for personal gain. Today, his name is synonymous with judicial betrayal. The robes and gavel are long gone, replaced by the weight of history's judgment. But if you think Conahan's story is shocking, wait until you hear about his partner in crime, Judge Mark Ciavarella. The man who turned juvenile court into a cash register faces a much different fate. His journey through the prison system reveals just how poetic justice can be when the tables turn.
A former juvenile court judge in Pennsylvania could face more than 10 years in prison after being convicted in a kids for cash scheme. Prosecutors say he used children as pawns, locking them up unjustly in a plot to get rich.
March 11, 2009. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court made a historic decision. They threw out hundreds of juvenile convictions. At the center of this storm was Judge Mark Arthur Ciavarella Jr., a man once trusted to uphold justice in Luzerne County. But his actions would shatter that trust and devastate young lives across the state. Ciavarella, born and raised in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, seemed like the model of civic involvement. He graduated from King's College and Duquesne Law School, served as city solicitor, and even became a partner at a respected law firm. Elected judge in 1995, he presented himself as tough on juvenile crime, what he called a zero-tolerance approach. But behind that badge of authority, Ciavarella was orchestrating one of the worst judicial scandals in American history, known as the Kids for Cash scheme. He and fellow Judge Michael Conahan shut down a county-run juvenile detention center. In its place, they funneled children into for-profit facilities owned by their business associates, all while pocketing $2.8 million in kickbacks. The numbers are staggering. Over 4,000 juvenile convictions were thrown out. Nearly 2,300 kids were affected. Some children were sent to detention for minor infractions. Jaywalking, truancy, even mocking a principal on MySpace. Teenagers were handcuffed and taken away without a chance to say goodbye to their families, all to fill beds in the private facilities and keep the kickback money flowing. Ciavarella's courtroom became a trap. Many children appeared without lawyers or were pressured to waive their right to counsel. The judge's zero-tolerance policy meant that even first-time offenders faced harsh sentences. Cases ranged from petty theft to simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. One child testified that Ciavarella ruined my life and just didn't let me get to my future. The psychological damage was enormous. Victims described lasting trauma, like shaking uncontrollably during routine traffic stops years later. Several of the affected children later died from overdoses or suicide. The judge's actions left a trail of broken lives and shattered families. Ciavarella tried to claim the money was just a finder's fee, not a bribe. But the evidence told a different story. The federal charges included racketeering, fraud, money laundering, extortion, bribery, and tax violations. He was convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to 28 years in federal prison. He fought to keep his pension, but the state denied his benefits. The court ruled he wasn't entitled to the $234,000 he'd contributed, as it would go toward restitution for victims. In 2022, a federal judge ordered Ciavarella and Conahan to pay over $200 million in damages to their victims. The court calculated $1,000 for each day of wrongful detention, adjusted based on each case. While it's unlikely the victims will see much of that money, the judgment stands as recognition of the gravity of their crimes. Ciavarella's story is more than just a tale of corruption. It's a warning about what happens when those entrusted with power abuse it for personal gain. The Kids for Cash scandal exposed deep flaws in the juvenile justice system and led to widespread reforms. Today, Mark Ciavarella sits in a federal prison in Kentucky, inmate number 15008-67. His projected release date is 2034, when he'll be 85 years old. The man who once held children's futures in his hands now faces a future behind bars, a fate far less severe than what he inflicted on thousands of young lives. But the next story in this twisted true crime saga shows that sometimes justice takes an even darker turn.
U.S. Federal Judge Harry Claiborne may have faced adversity in the past, but never like this. A federal grand jury in Reno has handed down an 8-count indictment, charging that the judge tried to extort a $100,000 payoff in return for stalling a decision affecting a federal probe into voter fraud.
May 25, 1984, Las Vegas, Nevada. Federal Judge Harry Claiborne sits in his chambers, convinced that his connection to the city's most notorious figures will never catch up with him. He thinks the law is his to command, but the truth hidden in a maze of mob connections and backroom deals is about to come crashing down. What started as a routine tax investigation will soon expose the dark underbelly of justice itself. But Harry Claiborne's story begins in the small Arkansas town of McRae in 1917, where his father, a cotton farmer, stood against the Ku Klux Klan, and young Harry built a reputation for speaking up in courtrooms long before he ever wore a judge's robe. Claiborne's journey from a small-town boy to the center of a national legal scandal would span decades, crossing paths with celebrities, mobsters, and eventually, federal prison bars. Claiborne's legal career first took shape after he graduated from Cumberland School of Law in 1941. He initially worked as a clerk in Little Rock, but World War II changed his path. He joined the U.S. Army and became a military police officer, eventually landing in Las Vegas to supervise MPs. After the war, Claiborne didn't return to Arkansas. Instead, he made Vegas his home. By 1947, Claiborne had passed the Nevada bar and quickly established himself as a formidable defense attorney. His reputation grew, thanks in part to his flamboyant courtroom tactics, like carrying stacks of supposedly vital documents that turned out to be blank, and his client list read like a who's who of Las Vegas royalty. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Judy Garland all trusted Claiborne with their legal troubles. But it was his work for less savory characters like Bugsy Siegel, Frank Lefty Rosenthal, Joe Conforte, and Benny Binion that raised federal eyebrows. Claiborne's connections to the mob world were no secret. He often advised clients to never fill out net worth statements for gaming licenses, warning that such paperwork could be used against them in tax cases. He himself never completed one, a decision that, in retrospect, carried its own irony. In 1978, with the backing of his former political rival, now Senator Howard Cannon, Claiborne was appointed as a federal judge by President Jimmy Carter. Despite concerns about his suitability, some questioning his age, others his associations, he was confirmed and soon became chief judge for the District of Nevada. His bench was a stage, and he presided with the same flair that made him famous in the courtroom. But underneath the judicial robes, trouble was brewing. The first cracks appeared with Joe Conforte, the Mustang Ranch brothel owner and former client who, facing his own legal troubles, suddenly remembered tens of thousands in alleged bribes paid to Claiborne for fixing cases and quashing subpoenas. The allegations were thin, but the Justice Department pressed on, buoyed by ambitious Las Vegas FBI Chief Joseph Yablonsky. When the bribery charges failed to stick, thanks to clear evidence that Conforte couldn't have paid the alleged bribes, the feds shifted their focus. They discovered Claiborne had failed to report over $100,000 in income from 1979 and 1980, money earned before his federal appointment. The evidence was clear, and in August 1984, Claiborne became the first sitting federal judge convicted of crimes while on the bench. His descent from power was as dramatic as his rise. He refused to resign, continuing to draw his judicial salary even while serving his 2-year prison sentence. Congress responded with articles of impeachment, and in 1986, the House voted 406-0 to remove him. The Senate, using a special 12-member committee for the first time in history, confirmed his removal. Claiborne served 17 months in federal prison, returning to a Las Vegas legal community that still respected him. The Nevada Supreme Court allowed him to practice law again in 1987, and he resumed his career, albeit barred from federal cases. His health declined, prostate cancer, a heart attack, and eventually Alzheimer's, but he remained defiant to the end. In 2004, facing mounting pain and dementia, Claiborne took his own life. His legacy remains complicated, part legal legend, part cautionary tale. His story marked a turning point in American judicial history, setting new precedents for impeachment and serving as a stark reminder that even those who interpret the law are not above it. But Claiborne's impact didn't end with his removal. His case fundamentally changed how federal judges are held accountable, creating new procedures for judicial discipline and oversight. The very system that once protected judges from political influence now has clear mechanisms to remove those who violate public trust. Yet, among many in Las Vegas, Claiborne remained a beloved figure, more victim than villain. They saw his prosecution as selective, his downfall orchestrated by political enemies, and his removal as a tragic outcome of a flawed system. Even after his death, debates about his guilt and the fairness of his prosecution continued to divide legal scholars and the public. In the end, Harry Claiborne's story is one of complexity, of loyalty and betrayal, of power and its limits, and of a man who straddled the line between justice and its corruption. His life serves as both a warning and a lesson about the seductive power of influence, the importance of integrity, and the ultimate authority of the law. November 3, 1989. The United States Senate chamber fell silent as the final vote tally was announced. 89 senators voted to convict Judge Walter Nixon on the first article of impeachment. Only 8 opposed. With that, Nixon became the first federal judge in over 50 years to be forcibly removed from office. His dramatic fall from power wasn't just another judicial scandal. It changed American law forever. Walter Lewis Nixon Jr. was once a respected figure in Mississippi's legal world. A decorated Air Force veteran and Tulane-educated attorney, appointed by President Lyndon Johnson, Nixon rose to become Chief Judge of the United States District Court for the Southern District of Mississippi. But behind his judicial robe, Nixon maintained questionable relationships that would eventually lead to his undoing. The case against Nixon didn't start with violence or financial fraud. It began with a favor to a friend. Nixon's business associate Wiley Fairchild came to him seeking help for his son, Drew, who faced state drug charges. Nixon used his influence to persuade a local prosecutor, a longtime friend, to drop the case. When federal investigators questioned him about this intervention, Nixon lied. He repeated those lies before a grand jury, sealing his fate. In 1986, a federal jury convicted Nixon of perjury. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Still, he refused to resign his judicial post. Under the Constitution, only the House of Representatives could begin impeachment proceedings to remove a federal judge. This set the stage for one of the most significant constitutional battles of the 20th century. The House impeached Nixon in 1989 on 2 articles related to perjury, and a third concerning his financial dealings with an oil and gas company, while hearing cases involving that company. The Senate established a special trial committee under Rule 6 to review the evidence, a process Nixon would later challenge all the way to the Supreme Court. During the Senate trial, the case focused on Nixon's perjury and his continued attempts to profit from his judicial position. The evidence was overwhelming. On November 3, 1989, the Senate convicted him on both perjury articles. Nixon was removed from office immediately. But Nixon's story didn't end with his removal. He challenged the Senate's impeachment process in federal court, arguing that the full Senate, not just a committee, should have tried his case. This challenge reached the Supreme Court in Nixon v. United States, 1993. The court unanimously rejected his appeal, establishing a crucial precedent about the separation of powers and congressional authority over impeachment. After serving his prison sentence, Nixon returned to private law practice in Mississippi and later in Louisiana. His case became a key precedent during President Bill Clinton's impeachment trial a decade later, especially regarding perjury charges. Nixon's downfall exposed serious flaws in the federal judicial system. It highlighted how difficult it was to remove a sitting judge, even after a criminal conviction. His refusal to resign forced Congress to strengthen judicial discipline procedures, a legacy that still shapes the federal judiciary today. Today, Walter Nixon's name is forever linked to the boundaries of judicial power and congressional authority. His case set standards for judicial impeachment and clarified the separation of powers between Congress and the courts. But for those who remember his once respected career, his story remains a cautionary tale about the corrupting influence of power and the importance of judicial integrity. It's August 10th, 1990, New Orleans. FBI agents pull over a car belonging to sitting federal judge Robert Frederick Collins. He's calm, composed, as you'd expect from a man who's presided over countless cases. But this is a turn he never saw coming. Minutes later, agents discover $16,000 in cash in his chambers, directly linking him to a $100,000 bribery scheme involving drug trafficker Gary Young. Collins' fall from grace is not just another corruption story. It's a masterclass in how power, greed, and hubris collide in the American justice system. Born in 1931, Robert Frederick Collins' path began with promise. One of the first 3 African Americans admitted to LSU Law School in 1954, he became a prominent civil rights attorney. His rise through the legal ranks was historic. From private practice to a magistrate judge, then appointed to the federal bench by President Jimmy Carter in 1978. Collins' appointment was more than a personal achievement. It was a symbol of progress in the Deep South's legal system, a testament to perseverance and breaking barriers. For years, he served honorably, building a reputation for fairness and integrity. But by the late 1980s, Collins' world began to unravel. The catalyst? Gary Young, a marijuana trafficker facing serious federal charges, believed his case would land before Judge Collins. Instead of relying on legal defense, Young turned to bribery and found an all-too-willing accomplice in John H. Ross, Collins' longtime friend. The FBI's investigation reads like a crime thriller, but it's all documented in court records. Young, already cooperating with authorities, wore a wire. He recorded meetings with Ross, who assured Young that Collins could take care of the matter for $100,000. The conspiracy unfolded methodically. Ross demanded payment in installments, careful to stress that everything depended on getting the case assigned to Collins. When that happened, the real negotiations began. Collins, through Ross, insisted on half the bribe before sentencing, the rest after favorable treatment. The evidence is overwhelming. Taped conversations, marked bills, and direct surveillance. The FBI caught them red-handed, literally. When agents searched Collins' chambers, they found thousands of dollars in marked bills from Young's payments. But even as the walls closed in, Collins maintained his innocence. When confronted by FBI agents, he calmly denied any business dealings with Ross or illicit payments related to Young's case. These denials would later prove fatal to his defense. Collins didn't go down quietly. His defense team argued everything from entrapment to selective prosecution, even claiming racial bias in the investigation, but the evidence was too strong. Recorded conversations, surveillance, and the recovered cash painted a clear picture of corruption. The jury didn't buy Collins' story. They found him guilty of bribery, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The sentence was harsh but fitting, 82 months in federal prison. But Collins' downfall didn't end with his conviction. He stubbornly refused to resign from the bench, forcing Congress to begin impeachment proceedings. Only then did he finally step down, his once promising career in ruins. Collins served 5 years in federal prison, starting at the federal prison camp in Montgomery, Alabama. His status as a former judge made his incarceration particularly challenging. Inmates who once stood before him now shared cells and yards. The power dynamics flipped completely. His prison experience was marked by the same dignity he once displayed on the bench. Collins didn't seek special treatment, but his presence was a constant reminder of how far he'd fallen. The man who once decided others' fates now faced the daily realities of federal prison life. After his release in 1997, Collins' legal career was officially over. The Louisiana Supreme Court disbarred him, stripping away the last remnants of his professional life. The civil rights pioneer who broke barriers ended up as a cautionary tale about power and corruption. Collins' case sent shockwaves through the federal judiciary. It exposed vulnerabilities in the system and led to tighter oversight of judges' conduct. His conviction proved that no one, not even a federal judge, is above the law. The legacy of Robert Frederick Collins is complex. He was a pioneering civil rights attorney who became a symbol of progress, only to fall from grace spectacularly. His story is a stark reminder that integrity is fragile, and the temptations of power can corrupt even the most promising careers. But it's also a testament to the resilience of the justice system. The very institutions Collins once served ultimately held him accountable. His case stands as both a warning and a validation that justice, while sometimes delayed, is never denied.